Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Herd and 10 podcast. I don't know why I'm smiling. I should not be smiling. Um Crazy weekend both for the Bills and for the world at large. We are not here though to talk about the terrible things in the world. Right now, we are focused on the Buffalo Bills. We're trying to get you focused on something positive, something football related. Unfortunately, don't have a lot of positives to talk about. I want to start by just let's go out and just say it. The Buffalo Bills lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars, and it was rough. It there were some ups and downs. I mean, it's not all bad, but the Bills fall to the Jacksonville Jaguars 25-20. The Bills offense took a long time to get going. That part is, to me, what's probably the most frustrating in this game because I still think even in all the things that happened to this Buffalo Bills team, they still could have won this game if the offense put a little pressure a little earlier on in the game. It took them a little too long to get going, and it was too little too late, and that's why they fell 25-20. I will say this, though, silver lining here. Josh Allen continues to look incredible. Stephon Diggs, I'll even say it, and although he had a terrible drop, Gabe Davis did put up some big numbers, so that's promising. But some of the things that have plagued the Buffalo Bills without the injury, some of the things that have plagued them are really just unfocused receivers dropping the ball. And we saw it again. Dawson Knox struggled. Davis did have one terrible drop. Now, I would argue that he made up for it because he had some great catches late in the game, particularly on the final real proper drive where we scored. He made a great catch. He had the toe drag. So he did some really good things. Our run game obviously struggled. If you didn't see the game, it was pretty much non-existent. So that's certainly a concern. But I think we need to talk about a much bigger problem. It's not about this loss because I'm not really upset about the loss. It sucks, but losing to the Jacksonville Jaguars in London doesn't make me worried that we're not a good team. I still believe we're good, but I think we're in big trouble when it comes down to injuries. Talk to everyone a little bit about what's been going on. We got some serious injuries on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, obviously 2 weeks in a row, we lost a star on defense. We lost Trey White last week. We lost Milano yesterday. It feels really rough waking up today knowing that we're without two of our best defenders for the rest of the season. These are huge losses for our defense. They're irreplaceable players on our defense, not to mention Daquan Jones, who is having an excellent season at defensive tackle, a stalwart on defense, able to stop the run. He was putting a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and it looks like he's also out for the foreseeable future, if not the whole season. Apparently, he has a pectoral injury that requires surgery. So that's three of our best starters on defense who are gone. Other guys are going to have to step up. You know, we already saw Kyer Elam playing, Dane Jackson playing with very mixed results. Neither of them were able to cover Ridley. He torched us. That's a big concern going forward. They replaced Matt Milano with Dorian Williams. He missed some tackles. He looked okay at best. And then they pulled him for Terrell Dodson, who also at times looked okay, but I believe he got destroyed on that game sealing run for 35 yards. So we have some absolutely massive issues on defense now that we didn't have 2 weeks ago simply because of injuries.
It's very concerning. For me, I can't say I hate to do this, but the aspirations that we had going into this season, I would argue those are probably gone. The idea of going and winning a Super Bowl with this defense, look, anything is possible. I don't want Bills fans listening to think that it's not possible. Anything is possible. And we have an amazing offense. We have Josh Allen. But part of the reason I believed this could be the year was the fact that we had a great offense, but a defense to support that offense. And I would argue without these guys, are we maybe a middle of the road defense? I've said this before last season. We talked about this, Kev, that without Matt Milano, this is just not the same defense. And it's not to disrespect Tre'Davious White or Jordan Poyer or Micah Hyde or any of those top key pieces to the defense. Taron Johnson, of course, you got Von Miller, you have a lot of great players. But I would argue that Matt Milano is the most important piece to this defense. And without him, I just don't really believe that we have enough. I mean, I'll say this, Terrell Bernard has looked really good over the course of the season so far. But is he good enough to make up for a guy like Matt Milano being out? For a guy like Tre'Davious White being out? For us having Daquan Jones out? Daquan Jones has been a key linchpin to this run defense, and he is now gone. Matt Milano is gone, and they're not coming back, right? They're pretty much done. I mean, barring some miracle, I don't think either of them are coming back from what I've read. And without those guys, I mean, I know they brought in Josh Norman. They just signed him, but we know what he's about. He's maybe a borderline NFL player at this point. It's not to disrespect him, but he's well past his prime. We know this. After he got stiff-armed by Derrick Henry a couple years ago, I think that was the end of his career. So when I look at this, here's what I see. I see a team that had great potential. I see a team that could do something special if they make a big trade. At this point, I think the only way it's going to work, and maybe that's not going to happen for a while, I still see us going to the playoffs. I still see us as a good team, but this idea of us being a true Super Bowl contender with this beat up defense, let's look at the third downs. How many third downs? And it's not that Jacksonville's a bad team. I don't think they're a good team, but they're not a bad team. Trevor Lawrence is a good quarterback. He made some great throws in this game, but we made it look a lot easier for him than it needed to be. Or I should say, it looked easier for him than it should have been. Some of those third down plays where they were third and long, he was completing passes to receivers that were pretty much wide open. It's not like they were in tight coverage and the throw was incredible. They were good throws, but they weren't incredible throws. And I just saw our cornerbacks struggling. I saw Kaiir Elam looking exactly the way the coaching staff has said he's looked, which is lost, confused, inconsistent, and probably that all comes to work ethic and lack of preparation. He clearly has something in terms of his work ethic that they don't like, and that's the reason they healthy scratched him all season so far until they had no choice. And I see a guy in Dane Jackson who I'll give him some positive in that he's a hell of a tackler. The guy doesn't let a lot of guys buy him if he can tackle them. But in terms of true good coverage, he isn't that. And those two guys, I just don't see what exactly you can do. I mean, Christian Benford will come back. I think he's a solid cornerback. But what do you do on the other side? Because what I saw the Jaguars doing, and hopefully we have Benford, so then you only have one bad piece on cornerback. Teams are just going to attack that cornerback. Right, Kev? Like they're going to target whoever
I'm pretty sure
is
I
struggling.
said this before, but no matter how much Kaiir Elam is struggling at this point, I think you have no choice but to play him. Dane Jackson's ceiling is very, very low. Even in that game yesterday, they were picking on Dane Jackson more than they were picking on Kaiir Elam. It was clear to me they were picking out where Dane Jackson was playing. And we've seen enough from Dane Jackson. He's played for years. We know what his ceiling is. His ceiling is a middle of the road corner at best, who has actually gotten worse. I thought Dane Jackson looked a lot better in his first year than he did last year. I think he's gotten worse every season to the point where now the other team seems to know his tendencies. He's getting beat with ease, and there's no coverage going on that's good enough. You know, in a zone, maybe he can hold up, but one-on-one, he just can't. Zay Jones cooked him with ease in the first quarter for a touchdown. We're talking about Zay Jones. We're not talking about Devontae Adams. We're not talking about Tyreek Hill. We're talking about Zay Jones. We had Zay Jones for many years. He stinks. I'm sorry. He's not a good wide receiver, and Dane Jones couldn't even cover him. Not even close. He wasn't even in the area one-on-one with Zay Jones. So, no kidding, they're going to be targeting him the rest of the game. The guy is not good one-on-one. I get he's your, hopefully, I mean, he was kind of playing as your third string guy, which is not good. The first man up off of an injury. I don't agree with it. I think Kaiir Elam should be playing, which obviously he was yesterday. But I think Benford and Elam should be given every opportunity to take those jobs because I have no belief in Dane Jackson whatsoever. So I think they have to give Kaiir Elam a long leash and give him a chance to develop into the first round pick they originally thought he was going to be because they don't really have a choice. You already mentioned Josh Norman is not an option. I don't understand the signing. I think it's a complete waste of time. And I think Dane Jackson is not good enough on a team with our aspirations. Whether we still have a chance or not with this type of defense, I'll reserve that comment for later to see if some of the players who we put in as substitutes can pick up the slack. But I will say I think Benford and Elam should be playing corner because that gives us the best chance at getting at least one guy who may be elite.
So, question for you before we move on to another topic here. We look at this Buffalo Bills defense, you look at the cornerback situation. Do we need to be blaming Brandon Beane for not doing more? Because, yes, no one can see this coming in terms of how many injuries, but you better believe that at some point in the season you're going to lose one or two cornerbacks, whether it's for the entire season or at least for, a 4 to 5 week span. Did we not bolster the defensive backs enough? Because I know we brought in Taylor Rapp, who's looked really good at safety, but really we didn't do a whole lot to solidify the cornerback depth. You said it already. You had Dane Jackson as your next man up as the third option when it came to Tre'Davious White, Christian Benford. Do you feel like do we need to blame Bean? I guess that's my question. Is he at fault for some of the problems that we're now going to face?
I would say there is if picking Kyer Elam. It seems to be that, we drafted a corner in the first round, which I think we were all kind of excited about at the time. And so far, he just hasn't panned out. So to me, the blame would be, did they pick the right guy? To this point, it would seem they did not pick the right guy. He hasn't contributed really much at all. They did play him a little bit down the stretch last year and in the playoffs, and I actually thought Elam looked okay, which is why I still have some hope that he can turn things around. I actually think Kyer Elam could be a good player. I don't think we've given him enough of a chance yet. We've talked about this before, but I don't think our coaching staff tends to give rookies much of a chance. It's a surprise to me that they started Torrance from day one. Clearly, he's looked really good. So outside of the game yesterday, where our entire O-line struggled, but again, I don't think, and they are playing Dalton Kincaid quite a bit, but maybe they're not targeting him enough. Maybe they're not planning the offense around him quite enough. They're still playing Dawson Knox, who continues to drop balls at an alarming rate. He had a big momentum-changing drop yesterday, and it's just not good enough from him. To me, I think Kincaid got a bit nicked up, and he's now in concussion protocol, which is another problem. But I don't feel like he's played more than Dawson Knox, which I believe he should be. I don't care that Knox has been around for a number of years. He's shown year after year after year that he does not have sure hands. He shows almost on a weekly basis his dropping the ball, and it's just not good enough. So you may want to put some of the blame on Sean McDermott. You have to play the guys you drafted. I feel like we're one of the only teams who kind of sits on rookies for years until they start playing him, and then when they finally do, they turn out to be good players. So you don't see Kansas City doing that. They draft guys and they throw them to the fire, and they don't care if they make a number of mistakes. They feel like they're ready for the playoffs, which is what we need to be.
I love that you brought up the Kansas City Chiefs. I've been spending a little time here looking at the 2022 NFL draft. You're not going to want to hear this. I don't think a lot of Buffalo Bills fans are going to want to hear this. But there was another cornerback taken just 2 spots before Kyer Elam, who has actually been graded as the best cornerback in the league so far throughout this year. And he was a top player for Kansas City last year on their defense. They know he's a cornerstone piece to their defense. That's Trent McDuffie. The guy has been lights out. He was taken 2 picks before Kyer Elam, but they handled him differently. They threw him in the fire, like you said. They made him play. They made him learn, and he responded. Kyer Elam, when he played last year, I thought he looked pretty good. The problem is they limited his abilities by not allowing him to play and learn. And because of that, we're now in a situation where you have a cornerback who probably would be a lot more experienced and would be able to help us a lot more, who now has basically 0 experience and is now kind of being thrown into the fire. And you're seeing what comes from that, because it's going to be a hard lesson learned, I hope, for the organization. But yes, Trent McDuffie on the Kansas City Chiefs has looked lights out. In this article, it's specified that he's I think he's the highest. Yeah, based on advanced metrics, he is the top cornerback in the NFL based on Pro Football Focus. So if that doesn't bother you, I don't know. I don't know what else to tell you. I do want to move on talking a little bit about the offensive side of the ball. Josh Allen looked great. Our receivers looked pretty good outside of, as you mentioned, Knox continues to struggle mightily. Gabe Davis had one bad drop, which, again, terrible drops can cause losses. But I want to talk about the offensive line and maybe how that also bleeds into what we're seeing from James Cook. Now, it's just 1 week, but I felt like the old eyeball test was telling me that the offensive line struggled. They did not have a particularly good effort. And more importantly, James Cook really did not look good. He ended the game with -5 rush yards, which happens. He didn't have a lot of carries, but that's concerning to me. The fact that he could have a game like that is certainly a concern, at least for me moving forward. Look, I started this season saying that James Cook was a middle of the road type running back. I didn't believe that he's a good starter, but I'll say it. I thought he proved me wrong. He's looked good for most of the season. He's really responded well. But then you see what he did against the Jaguars, and it makes me question, is he somewhere in between? Is he not as good as his best games and not as bad as his worst? Because if that's the case, it puts him exactly where I thought he was, which is a middle of the road running back, which isn't terrible, but it really doesn't push the needle for the Bills in terms of trying to win a Super Bowl. If you're trying to win a Super Bowl, your running back sure as hell better be better than middle of the road. So a little bit of a concern there for me. And then, of course, if our offensive line is anything like they were this week, I don't care how good James Cook is, he's going to struggle no matter what. So I hope that this is just, another bad game, which is stings because we had the Jets game and we thought that was over with, but we did put up another stinker. Now, part of it is, connected to these injuries. But again, I come out of this week and I'm going, okay, what exactly are the Bills? What do we have? I don't have that answer quite yet. And I don't think we're going to get the answer against the Giants. I want to talk about that. Let's talk about this preview for the upcoming game for the Sunday nighter against the Giants. And to me, a big key to the game. Can you stop Darren Waller without Matt Milano? Kev, can you stop Darren Waller, who has not been that good this year, but can you stop him without Matt Milano?
Well, there's one interesting thing about this game, too, is that Tyrod Taylor might be starting the game, which is, a familiar face who I'm not necessarily afraid of. But, I mean, Daniel Jones has been so awful that I'd probably rather face Daniel Jones just because I think he stinks. And obviously you're playing Daboll, who was your offensive coordinator.
Well, you want a quarterback that's kind of mentally damaged, right? Like Daniel Jones right now is coming in with nothing, right? Low confidence. Tyrod Taylor, nothing bad has happened to him. Nothing good, but nothing bad.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's good, but in a one-game stretch, I think he could have a good game. So my bigger concern would just be Tyrod Taylor having a big game, some unexpected plays, maybe he's a little more, I don't know if he's more mobile than Daniel Jones because Daniel Jones has been very mobile, but like you said, he is pretty scarred at this point from the Giants offensive line. I've been watching some of the Giants games and some of the, the O-line play is almost inexplicable. I hope for the Bills that one game against the Jaguars is just a blip. And, it was because our coaching staff made a terrible mistake by going to London only 48 hours before the game. I can't understand the reasoning behind that. If I had been the coach, I would have left Monday morning. I can't understand why we waited 5 days to get to London when we could have been there, at least we could have gotten there Tuesday morning instead of Friday morning. I really don't understand that decision. the team looked like they were jet lagged on the field. So hopefully one of the keys to this game is just it's in Buffalo, and hopefully we're back on normal rest and normal Eastern Standard Time, and we're not all foggy on the field. So to me, if we just even play an average game, I think we're going to demolish the Giants.
Yeah, this isn't a game that, concerns me a lot. I would say bringing up the Tyrod Taylor piece is probably the only piece that I would say could be an X factor, just because our cornerback play has looked atrocious. And I know that Tyrod Taylor has a really good deep ball. So I would say when I look at this game, I would say there's one really main key to this game, which is pressure. If you're able to pressure Tyrod Taylor, and the key being that it's early on in the game, don't let him get comfortable. He's coming in as a backup. He hasn't played in a long time. Get pressure quickly. Don't let him get some of those easy passes, because we know they're going to try to get him started like that, right? They're going to try some screens. They're going to try to run the ball. They'll try some short, slants or drag plays, something to get him in rhythm. I think if you can get pressure quickly and stop that, I think you have a pretty good chance to really just riddle his entire night. The other piece is getting that pressure won't allow him to throw the deep ball. He does have a great deep ball. He may not be a great quarterback, but he has a great deep ball. And knowing our cornerback situation, that should actually be more of an incentive for Sean McDermott and the Buffalo Bills defense to send extra pressure. I think that you got to send extra pressure. You got to get to Tyrod Taylor very early in the game. Don't let him get comfortable. And the offense just needs to do what they do. They had a slow start, but I think that comes to play in what you talked about, which was the travel bug thing. I think really affected that game too. Traveling to London, it did not help us. It certainly did not help us. So I look at this game as a great chance to bounce back again on national TV, bounce back, show the NFL what we're about, and hopefully, if we can get enough pressure, then maybe our cornerbacks, particularly Kaiir Elam, can settle down a little bit. Because part of his struggles might be nerves as well.
And I'll just say one more thing. I think if the Bills had played Jacksonville as a proper home game, I don't think there's any way we lose. And for that matter, Milano probably wouldn't have gotten hurt on the turf, which is really, really unfortunate for the Bills.
Well, our dad sent us that piece earlier today, which was really interesting, that the field they played at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium has a sort of mixed breed between grass and turf that's pretty good to play on. And they have chosen not to allow NFL teams to use it, as they don't want them to destroy their grass, even though they're hosting them. And unfortunately, they gave them horrendous turf. And yeah, there's a legitimate conversation probably that needs to be had, or at least it's a legitimate concern for me that injury does not happen on a normal field. Now, having said that, the Buffalo Bills also play on AstroTurf. So it's not to say that couldn't have happened, but it may have been less likely because the turf that they were playing on was particularly bad turf. I'm honestly surprised that the NFL even allowed that. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot we can do. You hope that they take that into consideration when they schedule games next year in London. But it's certainly disappointing to lose a guy like Matt Milano, who we have lost before, and we've seen what's happened to the defense. So I would say to take from this, just hope and pray that the Buffalo Bills offense is as good as we think it is, because I don't think the defense is going to be quite what we had hoped. And go Bills.
Go Bills.